Florida Power and Light responded to universal fury over its request to raise rates to unprecedented levels by agreeing to a negotiated settlement for less. A settlement with whom, you may be asking? With some of its biggest corporate customers in talks held out of public view. Residential customers did not have a seat at that table. Bradley Marshall is one of the attorneys challenging the rate hike on behalf of several citizens groups, joining us right now from his office in Tallahassee. Bradley, good to see you.
Glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
So you have requested that the Public Service Commission reject this settlement. Why?
We've asked the Public Service Commission to rule against this settlement and disapprove it because it really is the golden deal for Florida Power and Light. The company gets almost everything that they want, and its biggest customers get almost everything they want. And who's left paying for all of that, of course, is residential customers and small businesses.
Let me ask you, just the process of a settlement, how does that even happen? I mean, there's, just for anyone who hasn't kind of plugged into this yet, FP&L has been holding public hearings around the state for a few months now about its rate request that it was ready to take to the Public Service Commission. PSC commissioners are listening to this. And then there's a settlement announcement, but like, where did they settle and how did they choose who was going to be in that room and how did that even happen?
That's entirely in the hands of Florida Power and Light. They get to choose who they are trying to settle with, and often there's non-disclosure agreements that happen with these kinds of deals, and so it is all out of public view. And so what the public gets is sort of the end product of that process, which is the settlement agreement itself, which Florida Power and Light filed with the Florida Public Service Commission, and which the Public Service Commission reviews, and which we of course oppose. But the actual making of that settlement all happens behind closed doors and is generally protected by non-disclosure agreements.
Well, so what we do know out of the court file, I mean, I pulled your response and I'd like to just read a little bit of the conclusion, which says a settlement, and worth noting that you have a little air quotes in the settlement, a settlement by the 1% interest does nothing to settle the issues in this case, given that the parties to the settlement take everything they want from residential and small business customers and give up nothing in return. So the 1% we know are customers like Walmart, like Wawa. I saw a couple of other corporate interests who do use electricity. And so I wonder, when FP&L comes forward and says, oh, this settlement is going to be much better because we've lowered our ask by, I think they said like 30%, why aren't they listening to the public? In other words, the cost shifting here seems like the public will be picking up what the corporate entities are giving up. Why?
And that's exactly what.
Yeah, go ahead.
And that's exactly what's happening here, and why we are against this so-called settlement. And that's why we put it in air quotes. Is we ask how much of a settlement can it really be if it doesn't actually settle any of the what we see issues in the case, and instead is a backroom deal between FPL and some of their biggest customers. And so we know that the settlement, based on FPL's own filing and their numbers of what the settlement means for the different classes of customers, actually is not a reduction for some classes. General service, which is small businesses, will actually see their rates increase by more than triple than what was originally proposed by FPL. If their entire ask had been approved in full, small businesses would have seen a much lower increase than is what is contemplated by this, what we call, in air quotes, settlement.
So I want to, in an abundance of fairness, we did invite representatives for FP&L to join us today. As you see, they are not. I just want to put out there, I mean, everyone at FP&L and all the investors deserve to make money, and as well they should. In their own paperwork, FP&L sets the rate of return for FP&L investors or parent company investors at almost 11%. How set the bar? Is that a big number? Is that a small number? Is that a valid return on investment for investors?
It's a great question. It's the highest in the nation that any public service commission or public utility commission has awarded in the last couple of years, and is the highest nationwide of any major utility. There's one in Alaska somewhere that has a higher one, but lower, equity ratio makes much lower profits that you can't drive to. You have to take a boat or fly to it. And so, and it's less than one thousandth of the size of Florida Power and Light. So very different circumstances. There is no utility anywhere near the size of FPL that has anywhere near the return on equity that FPL proposes to give itself in this settlement. In fact, the nearest contender would be what the Florida Public Service Commission gave Tampa Electric Company last year when it set its return on equity at 10.5%, which is, it's worth noting, under appeal. And part of the justification for that was that TECO, for Florida standards, is a relatively small utility and it's very geographically compact, and that makes it a riskier utility in the Public Service Commission's view. Obviously, FPL is neither of those two things.
It seems like the whole infrastructure of how this utility works is kind of skewed toward the company. I mean, here you have a monopoly. No one has a choice except if you put solar panels on, which is a whole different story. But here, I had asked a question to one of the FP&L reps pretty recently. Why buy advertising? Why spend the money on advertising if you are a utility? Why give politicians hundreds of millions of dollars in political contributions if you are a monopoly? Some of those contributions we now know paid for a fake candidate to unseat a senator FP&L didn't like. How do you answer those questions? Just so I am very fair to FP&L, their rep said that those are the investors that pay for it, not our customers. Does that make sense to you?
Well, I mean, that's how the accounting works. FPL generally tries not to, I think genuinely tries generally to not try to charge ratepayers those costs. But of course, all that money comes from ratepayers, whether they're being charged for it or not. It's just the source of the money is whether it's from their profits or whether it's a cost of recovering from ratepayers. And it did come out that some of their lobbying costs in this case were mistakenly charged to ratepayers, which FPL rectified. But the ultimate source, of course, is from the enormous profits that they are making from the ratepayers of Florida. And I think part of what FPL relies on is its public image to get political capital and to make sure that folks at the legislature listen to them and to create a regulatory environment that, in their own words, is very constructive. I think constructive is another way of saying lax. And you can see it in deals like this where FPL, instead of having a robust review process where its generation resource plans, for example, are reviewed in detail, is trying to set itself up for basically 4 years of self-regulation. If the Public Service Commission approves this settlement, basically you're going to have automatic rate increases for the next 4 years with not much oversight except for maybe in the out years regarding some generation if FPL proves it's economic or needed for reliability.
As someone who has much more experience than so many sitting in on these kind of meetings with the Public Service Commission, there are public hearings. There are a lot of people that go. There are a lot of people who stand up at the mic and say things. How much weight does the PSC give the public requests? Does the public actually have any power, or is this window dressing?
It's up to the Public Service Commission as to how much weight it gives comments from the public. We hope that they hear from the public and will take that into consideration. One of the stories Florida Power and Light likes to tell the Public Service Commission is that that people welcome these rate increases because Florida Power and Light is so great for the state. It's great for the economy. And so you actually saw it at a lot of these public hearings where people had been asked to be there by Florida Power and Light and to speak in favor of the rate increases. And I was one of those people who got to ask some of those folks the question of, well, do you get money from Florida Power and Light? And often the answer was yes. And so Florida Power and Light helps to, one of the issues the Public Service Commission has to consider as part of this rate case is the quality of service that Florida Power and Light is providing its customers. And this is to take into account the public comments. And so I think it matters a great deal that people that aren't being asked to be there by Florida Power and Light and aren't being paid and have a financial interest in Florida Power and Light speak up and let the Public Service Commission know what they think of FPL's quality of service and whether they want to see their bills go up.
Always good for engagement, which is what we do. Bradley Marshall, great to have you here. I appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.